Right now, there are people making millions of dollars off your emotional reactions. Every notification on your phone, every headline you see, every advertisement that pops up is designed to trigger you, to make you feel something so intense that you can't help but respond. They want you anxious, angry, desperate, and constantly seeking their next fix of content, products, or validation. But here's what they don't want you to know. 2,000 years ago, a group of ancient philosophers cracked the code on emotional immunity. The Stoics didn't just survive in a world trying to manipulate them, they thrived by becoming completely unshakable. While everyone around them was being tossed around by their feelings like ships in a storm, these people had figured out how to become the eye of the hurricane. They developed mental techniques so powerful that Roman emperors used them to rule empires, and slaves used them to find freedom, even in chains. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what they did, and more importantly, how you can use these same methods to take back control of your emotional life, starting right now. Part 1. The Emotional Hijack Prevention System. Have you ever sent a text message in anger and immediately regretted it? Have you ever made a decision when you were upset that you wish you could take back? What if I told you that between the moment something triggers you and the moment you react, there's a hidden window of opportunity that most people never learn to use? The Stoics discovered this secret gap in time, and they turned it into their greatest weapon against emotional manipulation. Most people think emotions just happen to them. Something occurs, they feel something, and then they react. It's like being on autopilot. But here's what the ancient Stoics knew that modern psychology is just now catching up to. Between the trigger and your reaction, there's always a pause. Always. Even if it's just a fraction of a second. The problem is, we've been trained to ignore this pause and react instantly. The Stoics called this pause the moment of choice. They realized that whoever controls this moment controls their entire life. Think about every major mistake you've made, every relationship you've damaged, every opportunity you've lost. I guarantee you can trace it back to a moment where your emotions hijacked your decision-making process. But what if you could install a mental firewall that automatically activates during this crucial moment? What if you could create a system that gives you just enough time to think before you react? This is exactly what technique number 1 out of 8 teaches you to do. The Emotional Hijack Prevention System works like this. The moment you feel a strong emotion rising, you immediately ask yourself 3 simple questions. First, what am I feeling right now? This forces your brain to shift from emotional reaction to analytical observation.
Second, what triggered this feeling? This helps you identify the real source instead of attacking the wrong target. Third, what would my wisest self do right now? This connects you to your higher thinking instead of your primitive impulses. Here's the key. You must practice this when you're calm, not when you're triggered. It's like learning to drive. You don't wait until you're speeding down the highway to figure out how the brakes work. Start using this system on small irritations first. The person who cuts you off in traffic, the coworker who interrupts you in meetings, the friend who's always late. Every time you successfully use this 3-second firewall, you're literally rewiring your brain. You're proving to yourself that you can be the observer of your emotions instead of their victim. Within just a few weeks of practice, this becomes automatic. Your emotions stop controlling you, and you start controlling them. The ancient Stoics understood something that took modern neuroscience decades to prove. The same brain that can be hijacked by emotions can also be trained to resist that hijacking. But you have to be intentional about it. You have to build this firewall before you need it. Part 2. The Perspective Time Machine. Right now, you're probably worried about something. Maybe it's a work deadline that's coming up. Maybe it's a relationship problem that's been eating at you. Maybe it's money stress that keeps you awake at night. Whatever it is, I want you to hold that worry in your mind for a moment, because I'm about to show you how to make it instantly smaller. The Stoics had a mental technique that was so powerful, it could dissolve years of anxiety
in just a few minutes. They called it taking the long view, but I call it the perspective time machine. It's the ability to mentally travel through time and see your current problems from the viewpoint of your future self. Here's what most people do wrong. They live entirely in the present moment of their problem. They're so zoomed in on what's happening right now that they can't see anything else. It's like putting your face right up against a movie screen. All you see is blurry chaos. But step back, and suddenly you can see the whole picture. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the ancient world, used this technique constantly. Even as Emperor of Rome, dealing with wars, plagues, and political crises, he would remind himself that in the grand timeline of history, his current struggles were just tiny blips. This wasn't about minimizing his problems. It was about seeing them clearly. This brings us to technique number 2 out of 8 that will revolutionize how you handle stress and worry. The perspective time machine works in 3 stages. First, you fast forward exactly 10 years into the future. Imagine yourself a decade from now, looking back at today's problem. How significant does it seem? Will you even remember? Most of the things that stress us out today will be completely forgotten in 10 years. But here's the deeper level. Don't just think about whether you'll remember the problem. Think about who you'll be in 10 years, because you went through this challenge. Every difficult situation is either making you stronger or making you weaker. There's no neutral. The Stoics understood that obstacles aren't roadblocks. They're raw material for building character. Second, you zoom out, even further. 100 years from now, everyone you know will be gone. All the people whose opinions you're worried about right now won't exist. The job you're stressed about keeping won't exist. The social media drama that's consuming your thoughts won't exist. This isn't morbid thinking, it's liberating thinking. Third, you zoom out to the cosmic level. Our entire planet is a tiny dot in an infinite universe. The sun that lights our world is just one star among billions in our galaxy, and our galaxy is just one among trillions. From this perspective, your current anxiety isn't just small, it's practically non-existent. But here's the key insight the Stoics discovered. This exercise doesn't make you care less about your life. It makes you care more about the right things. When you see how brief and precious your time is, you stop wasting emotional energy on things that don't matter. Start practicing this today. Every time you feel overwhelmed, mentally travel forward 10 years. Ask your future self what really mattered about this moment. The answer will surprise you every time. Part 3. The Internal Weather Report. Yesterday it was sunny. Today it's raining. Tomorrow it might be cloudy. When the weather changes, do you think there's something wrong with you? Do you take it personally? Do you try to fight the rain or negotiate with the wind? Of course not. You understand that weather is something that happens around you, not something that happens to you. So why do you treat your emotions completely differently? Why do you act like you are your anger instead of someone who is experiencing anger? Why do you believe you are your sadness instead of someone who is currently feeling sad? The Stoics figured out something revolutionary about emotions that most people never learn. Your emotions are weather patterns, not your identity. Think about the last time you were really angry. Where is that anger now? It came, it peaked, and it went away. Just like a thunderstorm. Think about the last time you were deeply sad. Where is that sadness now? It visited you for a while, and then it moved on. Just like a rainy day. Your emotions follow the same patterns as weather. They're temporary, they're natural, and they're completely separate from who you are. But here's where most people get trapped. They mistake the weather for the climate. They think because they're feeling anxious right now, they are an anxious person. They think because they are going through a depressed period, they are a depressed person. This is like thinking you are the rain just because it's raining outside your window. This confusion between temporary emotional weather and permanent identity is what keeps people stuck in patterns that don't serve them. But technique number 3 out of 8
will teach you how to become a skilled meteorologist of your own inner world. The internal weather report technique transforms you from someone who gets caught in emotional storms to someone who can observe them with calm detachment. Here's how it works. Several times throughout your day, you're going to check your internal weather. Not to change it, not to judge it, just to notice it. You might say to yourself, there's some anxiety moving through today. Or, there's irritation in the forecast. Or, it's been mostly calm with occasional clouds of worry. The language you use is crucial. You're not saying, I am anxious. You're saying, I'm observing anxiety. You're not saying, I am irritated. You're saying, I notice irritation passing through. This shift in language creates a shift in perspective. You become the sky, and your emotions become the weather. The sky doesn't fight the clouds. It doesn't take the rain personally. It simply provides space for whatever weather pattern wants to move through. Sometimes it's storms, sometimes it's sunshine, but the sky remains constant and untroubled. The Stoics understood that you can't control what emotions show up, but you can control how much space you give them and how seriously you take them. A master of this technique might notice intense anger arising and think, interesting, there's an anger storm brewing. I wonder how long it will last. They become curious observers rather than overwhelmed victims. Here's the practical application. Start treating your emotions like weather reports. When someone asks how you're doing, instead of saying, I'm stressed, try saying, I'm experiencing some stress weather today. Instead of, I'm depressed, try, there's been some heavy emotional weather lately, but I'm noticing it's starting to clear. This isn't just playing with words. This is rewiring your relationship with your emotional life. You're training your brain to see emotions as temporary visitors rather than permanent residents. And just like weather, once you stop fighting it and start observing it, you realize it always changes on its own. Part 4. The Emotional Audit Trail. There's a thief in your life, and they're stealing your peace of mind every single day. They know exactly which buttons to push to drain your emotional energy. They know precisely when you're most vulnerable. They've studied your patterns, your triggers, your weaknesses. But here's the shocking part. You've never identified who this thief is, or even realized they exist. This emotional thief isn't a person. It's a collection of external triggers that consistently... For most people, these triggers are completely invisible. They react to the same situations, the same people, the same types of news or social media posts over and over again. But they never connect the dots. They never realize they're being systematically drained by predictable patterns. The ancient Stoics were detectives of their own emotional lives. They understood that you can't protect yourself from threats you can't see. So they developed a systematic way to identify exactly what was stealing their emotional energy, and then built immunity to those specific triggers. They turned their biggest weaknesses into their greatest strengths. Most people live their emotional lives completely unconsciously. They wake up feeling fine, then something happens during the day that triggers them, and suddenly they're upset, angry, or anxious. They have no idea what specific element caused the shift. It's like being poisoned without knowing what you ate. But what if you could create a detailed map of your emotional trigger points? What if you could identify the exact people, situations, thoughts, and environments that consistently steal your peace? What if you could then systematically build immunity to each one? This is exactly what technique number 4 out of 8 teaches you to master. The emotional audit trail is a daily practice that turns you into a forensic investigator of your own emotional patterns. Here's how it works. At the end of each day, you're going to conduct a brief emotional autopsy. You're going to trace back through your day and identify every moment where your emotional state shifted significantly. Start with the negative shifts first. When did you feel stressed, angry, anxious, or frustrated today? Don't just note that you felt these emotions. Dig deeper. What specifically triggered each emotional shift? Was it a particular person's tone of voice? Was it a specific type of email? Was it a certain news headline or social media post? Was it a particular environment or time of day? Write these triggers down. Be as specific as possible. Instead of writing work stress, write feeling overwhelmed when I see more than 10 unread emails in my inbox. Instead of writing family drama, write feeling anxious when my mother uses a certain tone of voice during phone calls. Here's where it gets powerful. After tracking your triggers for just 1 week, you'll start to see clear patterns. You'll realize that the same 5 or 6 things trigger you repeatedly. Most people are surprised to discover how predictable their emotional reactions are. Now comes the immunity-building phase. Once you've identified a specific trigger, you practice controlled exposure to it. If crowded spaces make you anxious, you deliberately spend short periods in crowds while practicing your breathing techniques. If certain types of criticism upset you, you practice receiving feedback while maintaining your inner calm. The Stoics called this preparing for adversity.
They would mentally rehearse challenging situations so that when they actually occurred, they would be emotionally prepared rather than emotionally hijacked. They understood that immunity isn't built by avoiding challenges. It's built by gradually exposing yourself to manageable doses of difficulty. Think of this like building physical immunity. You don't become immune to diseases by hiding from all germs. You build immunity through controlled exposure that allows your system to develop antibodies. Your emotional system works the same way. After just a few weeks of this practice, something remarkable happens. The triggers that used to consistently steal your emotional energy start losing their power over you. You become emotionally anti-fragile. Not only do these situations stop hurting you, they actually make you stronger. Part 5. The Stoic Stress Vaccine. Right now, your comfort zone is making you weak. Every day that you choose the easy path, the comfortable option, the familiar routine, you're training your brain to be less resilient. You're teaching yourself that you can't handle difficulty. You're programming yourself to fall apart when real challenges arrive. But here's what most people don't understand about strength. Physical strength isn't built by avoiding heavy weights. It's built by gradually lifting heavier and heavier loads. Mental and emotional strength works exactly the same way. You don't build resilience by avoiding discomfort. You build it by deliberately practicing manageable doses of difficulty. The ancient Stoics understood this principle better than anyone. They didn't wait for life to throw challenges at them. They deliberately created their own challenges. They practiced poverty while they were wealthy, so they wouldn't fear losing their wealth. They practiced discomfort while they were comfortable, so they could handle real hardship when it arrived. This brings us to technique number 5 out of 8. And it might be the most practical and immediately useful technique in this entire video. The Stoic Stress Vaccine works by deliberately introducing small, manageable discomforts into your daily routine. You're not trying to torture yourself. You're trying to expand your comfort zone, gradually and systematically. You're building confidence in your ability to handle whatever life throws at you. Here's how to start. Choose one small discomfort to practice each day. Take cold showers for 30 seconds. Wait an extra hour before eating when you're hungry. Have a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Sit in silence for 10 minutes without any entertainment. Do one task you've been procrastinating on. The key is to start small and be consistent. You're not trying to become a monk overnight. You're trying to prove to yourself that you can choose discomfort instead of having discomfort choose you. You're training your brain to associate challenge with growth instead of associating challenge with failure. But here's the deeper psychological principle at work. When you voluntarily choose difficulty, you're taking control of your relationship with hardship. Instead of being a victim of circumstances, you become someone who actively prepares for circumstances. This shift in mindset is incredibly powerful. Think about it this way. If you've never practiced handling small disappointments, how will you handle big disappointments? If you've never practiced being uncomfortable, how will you handle real discomfort? If you've never practiced delayed gratification, how will you handle situations that require patience and persistence? The Stoics realized that most people suffer more in imagination than in reality. They build up challenges in their minds to be much worse than they actually are. But when you regularly practice voluntary discomfort, you realize that most difficult things aren't as bad as you thought they would be. Start implementing this today. Choose one small discomfort and practice it for a week. Notice how your confidence grows. Notice how things that used to seem scary start seeming manageable. Notice how you start seeking challenges instead of avoiding them. Remember, the goal isn't to become someone who enjoys suffering. The goal is to become someone who isn't afraid of suffering. You are fighting battles you cannot win. Right now, as you listen to this, you are spending mental and emotional energy trying to control things that are completely outside your control. You're worried about what other people think. You're stressed about future events that may never happen. You're angry about past events that cannot be changed. Your nanry just managed to pekrais en tu forte and releasing. Here's the brutal truth. 90% of your stress comes from trying to control things you have no power over. You're like someone standing in the ocean trying to stop the waves with your bare hands. The waves keep coming. You keep getting knocked down and you wonder why you feel so tired and defeated all the time. But what if I told you there's a simple mental tool that could eliminate 90% of your stress in less than 60 seconds? What if you could instantly sort every problem in your life into 2 categories and by doing so immediately know exactly where to focus your energy and where to stop wasting it? The ancient Stoics discovered something that modern psychology calls the locus of control. They realized that everything in life falls into one of 2 categories. Things you can influence and things you cannot influence. That's it. Nothing exists outside these 2 categories. And here's the life-changing part. You only get to control your response to the first category. Epictetus, who started life as a slave and became one of the greatest philosophers in history, put it this way: some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are our opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our property, reputation, position, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing. This insight literally set him free, even while he was physically enslaved. He realized that no one could control his thoughts, his choices, or his responses. And if you understand this principle deeply enough, it will set you free too. This is technique number 6 out of 8, and it's the fastest way to reduce stress I've ever encountered. The circle of influence sorting hat works like this. Every time you feel stressed, worried, or frustrated, you immediately ask yourself one simple question. Is this something I can directly influence or not? Not can I influence the outcome, but can I influence the process? Can I take action that moves this situation in a positive direction? If the answer is yes, you focus all your energy on taking that action. You don't waste time worrying about it, complaining about it, or thinking about all the things that could go wrong. You just act. If the answer is no, you practice what the Stoics called negative capability. You let go completely. Let me give you some examples. You can influence how much effort you put into your work. You cannot influence whether you get promoted. You can influence how kind and loving you are in your relationships. You cannot influence whether other people love you back. You can influence how well you prepare for opportunities. You cannot influence whether those opportunities come. You can influence your daily habits, your responses to difficult people, your learning and growth, your attitude and your effort. You cannot influence the weather, other people's opinions, the past, the future beyond what you're doing today, or any outcomes that depend on factors outside your direct control. Here's what happens when you really implement this. You stop checking the news obsessively because you realize you can't influence most world events. You stop arguing with people on social media because you realize you can't control their opinions.
You stop worrying about whether people like you, because you realize you can only control how likable you choose to be. But here's the amazing part. When you stop wasting energy on things you can't control, you suddenly have massive amounts of energy available for things you can control. Your productivity skyrockets. Your relationships improve. Your stress levels plummet. Your results get better because all your energy is going toward actions that actually matter. The Stoics understood that this isn't about becoming passive or not caring about outcomes. It's about becoming strategically focused on where your power actually lies. Start using this sorting system today. Every problem, every worry, every source of stress gets immediately categorized. Circle of influence, or outside circle of influence. Then you act on category 1 and release category 2. Watch how quickly your life transforms when you stop fighting battles you were never meant to win. Part 7. The Negative Visualization Armor. You are afraid of the wrong things. Right now, you're probably worried about losing something you have or not getting something you want. This fear is quietly controlling more of your decisions than you realize. It's making you play it safe when you should take risks. It's making you hold back when you should move forward. It's keeping you trapped in situations that don't serve you because you're terrified of change. But here's what the Stoics discovered about fear. The things we're most afraid of losing are usually not as essential to our happiness as we think they are. And the process of losing them is usually not as devastating as we imagine it will be. Fear grows in darkness. It shrinks when exposed to light. Most people spend their entire lives running from imaginary monsters. They're so afraid of potential loss that they never fully enjoy what they currently have. They're so worried about future pain that they create present pain. They're so focused on what might go wrong that they miss what's going right. The ancient Stoics had a completely different approach to fear. Instead of avoiding thoughts of loss, they deliberately practiced imagining loss, not to make themselves miserable, but to make themselves stronger, not to attract negative outcomes, but to remove the power that fear of those outcomes had over their daily lives. Seneca would imagine losing his wealth. Marcus Aurelius would imagine losing his position. Epictetus would imagine losing his health. They weren't being pessimistic. They were being strategic. They were building psychological armor that would protect them if these losses actually occurred. This brings us to technique number 7 out of 8. And it might be the most counterintuitive but powerful technique in this entire video. Negative visualization armor works by deliberately, carefully, and temporarily imagining the loss of things you value most. You're not trying to make these losses happen. You're not being ungrateful for what you have. You're building emotional immunity to the fear of loss that's currently limiting your life. Here's how to practice this safely and effectively. Once a week, spend 5 minutes imagining that you've lost something important to you. Your job, your relationship, your health, your home. But here's the key. You don't just imagine the loss. You imagine how you would rebuild, how you would adapt, how you would find new sources of meaning and happiness. You discover that you're stronger than you think you are. You realize that your happiness doesn't depend on any external circumstance as much as you believed. You understand that you could handle whatever life throws at you, because humans are incredibly adaptable creatures. But here's the deeper benefit. When you finish this exercise and return to your normal life, everything you have feels like a bonus instead of a necessity. Your job stops being something you desperately need and becomes something you're grateful to have. Your relationships stop being sources of anxiety and become sources of joy. The Stoics called this the discipline of desire. They trained themselves to want what they had, instead of constantly wanting what they didn't have. They understood that a person who can be happy with very little can never truly be defeated by life. Think about people who have actually experienced major losses. People who have lost their homes in natural disasters often report that the experience taught them what really mattered. People who have survived serious illnesses often say it gave them a new appreciation for ordinary moments. People who have lost loved ones often become more present and loving with the people who remain. You don't have to wait for loss to teach you these lessons. You can learn them now through careful, intentional practice. You can build the wisdom that usually only comes through suffering, but without having to suffer first. Small. Imagine losing your phone for a week. How would you adapt? What would you discover about yourself? Then gradually work up to bigger scenarios. Always end the exercise by appreciating what you actually have and planning how you would rebuild if you had to. Remember, the goal isn't to become detached from life. The goal is to become unattached to specific outcomes, so you can fully attach to the present moment. When you're not afraid of losing what you have, you can finally enjoy having it. Part 8. The Philosophical Emergency Kit. Right now, you're carrying around a smartphone with access to all human knowledge. But when an emotional emergency hits, your mind goes completely blank. In the moment when you most need wisdom, you can't remember any wisdom. When you most need perspective, you lose all perspective. When you most need to think clearly, your thinking becomes completely clouded. This is exactly what happens to most people during emotional crises. All the self-help books they've read, all the advice they've received, all the techniques they've learned, just disappear. They react from their most primitive impulses instead of their highest wisdom. It's like being a doctor who forgets all their medical training the moment they see blood. But what if you could have instant access to the most powerful insights ever discovered about handling difficult emotions? What if you could carry around a collection of tested, proven responses that automatically activate during your most challenging moments? What if you had a wise mentor available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? The ancient Stoics understood that knowing something intellectually and being able to access it during a crisis are two completely different skills. So they developed a system for programming powerful responses directly into their unconscious minds. They created what I call philosophical emergency kits. These weren't just random quotes or positive affirmations. These were carefully selected, deeply internalized principles that could instantly reframe any difficult situation. They were like mental first aid for emotional emergencies. And they worked because they were simple, memorable, and immediately applicable. Marcus Aurelius carried around a collection of these principles in his personal journal. Seneca would write them in letters to friends. Epictetus would teach them to his students until they became automatic responses. These weren't just ideas to think about. They were tools to use when life got difficult. This brings us to technique number 8 out of 8, the final tool that will complete your emotional immunity system. The Philosophical Emergency Kit consists of 5 powerful questions and responses that you memorize so deeply they become automatic during emotional emergencies. These aren't just things to remember. These are new ways to think that will rewire your brain's default responses to difficulty. First, emergency response. When someone treats you badly, immediately think, this person is giving me an opportunity to practice patience and compassion. They're struggling with something I don't understand. Their behavior is about them, not about me. I can choose to respond with wisdom instead of reacting from hurt. Second emergency response. When something doesn't go according to your plan, immediately think, this obstacle is the path. The universe is not happening to me, it's happening for me. What is this situation trying to teach me? How can this make me stronger, wiser, or more compassionate? Third emergency response. When you feel overwhelmed by circumstances, immediately think,
I cannot control what happens, but I can control how I respond to what happens. My power lies in my choices, not in my circumstances. What would the strongest, wisest version of myself do right now? Fourth, emergency response. When you're tempted to worry about the future, immediately think, all I have is this moment. Worry is just using my imagination to create problems that don't exist yet. I will deal with future challenges when they become present realities, not before. Fifth, emergency response. When you feel like giving up, immediately think, difficulty is not a sign that I'm on the wrong path. It's a sign this feeling will pass, but the growth I gain from pushing through will last forever. Here's how to build your emergency kit. Write these 5 responses on a card and read them every morning for 30 days. Don't just read the words. Visualize yourself using each response during a difficult situation. Practice them when you're calm, so they're available when you're not. After 30 days, these responses will start activating automatically during emotional emergencies. Instead of falling into old patterns of reaction, you'll find yourself accessing wisdom you didn't even know you had. You'll become the person who stays calm when everyone else is panicking. The Stoics understood that philosophy isn't just about thinking, it's about living. These tools only work if you use them. But if you do use them consistently, they will transform not just how you handle difficult emotions, but how you experience life itself. So there you have it. 8 ancient techniques that can make you emotionally bulletproof in a world designed to keep you reactive and weak. The emotional hijack prevention system that gives you control over your instant reactions. The perspective time machine that shrinks your problems to their actual size. The internal weather report that separates your identity from your temporary emotions. The emotional audit trail that builds immunity to your specific triggers. The Stoic stress vaccine that prepares you for any challenge. The circle of influence sorting hat that eliminates 90% of your stress. The negative visualization armor that removes fear's power over your decisions. And the philosophical emergency kit that gives you wisdom precisely when you need it most. These aren't just interesting ideas, they're practical tools that work if you work them. The Stoics didn't develop these techniques as intellectual exercises. They developed them because they worked in the real world under real pressure during real challenges. 2,000 years later, they still work just as well. But remember, reading about these techniques is not the same as using them. Knowledge without application is just entertainment. The people who will benefit most from this video aren't the ones who found it most interesting. They're the ones who will actually implement what they've learned. Your emotional strength isn't determined by what happens to you. It's determined by how you respond to what happens to you. And now you have the tools the greatest minds in history used to build unshakable inner strength. The question isn't whether these techniques work. The question is whether you'll work them. Your emotionally bulletproof life is waiting for you to begin.